All right, welcome back everyone. This is Shadow Drake. So now we're in part 3 for the phase change heat pump series. And this video we're going to be detailing about how can you tell that it's working properly, when is it, how can you tell that it is about to fail, and what safeguards you can use to prevent the system from failing completely. Part 1, I covered how to build it both physically as well as advantages of a phase change heat pump. Part 2, I talked about how to properly fill it and how to choose which refrigerant. And so now part 3, we're going to finish this series up. Before we go to how it's going to fail, let's talk about working properly. This one is actually the very simple part. If you have equal latent energy on both chambers, it's working properly. What that means is however much energy the evaporation chamber is taking for cooling, if that equals how much energy is being dumped off by the condensation chamber due to heating, if those match, then that means you're good. That means both systems are capable of keeping up with each other. Equal amount of energy being taken in is dumped right out. That's perfect. That's what the heat pump is for. Additionally, I want to add no gas is condensing in the gas pipes. This could come from either because it's overfilled but predominantly gas is condensing in the gas pipes or pooling in the gas pipes is indicative that you have a problem. But before we go too far into that, let's go over to this setup over here. Now, as I mentioned before, it's extremely difficult to tell how much energy is being moved out of a phase change heat pump. And so to do that, whoops, I forgot I need to remove this pipe. And so to calculate that better, you need to know the change in temperature, how much moles of gas you have, and the specific heat. In this case, this is just a pure oxygen tank, so it has a very easy specific heat and easy to calculate. When you multiply all three of those numbers together, you get how much energy is being changed. And so as you can tell, my tank is losing about 7,500 joules of energy. My gas pipe is losing about another 400. Now, in the beta, this will be on live soon. We got added this heat exchange rate on the chambers to help also visualize it. I don't think it's quite accurate. I think it's also counting I believe it's completely counting the latent energy and evaporation. But also keep in mind that my liquids might actually be a little bit cooler than expected, so it could actually be working a bit better. But even if we just look at the latent energy, you see latent energy here is about 8 kilojoules, and you can tell by the board, the numbers behind that it doesn't quite add up to fully 8 kilojoules. And so that kind of explains that kind of just goes along with what I said, that some of the energy from the latent energy is spent to cool the incoming liquids to get it to the correct temp so that this system can work a bit better. Even if I were to remove the connection to the gas pipe network, you can see that even then, that doesn't match up with the latent energy. So some energy is spent cooling the refrigerant in the chamber, so not all of it goes into the the gases that you intend to heat or cool in the phase change system. Once again, to know that this system is working properly, you see that the evaporation chamber is evaporating at about 6 kilojoules of energy. If I compare that to the condensation side, that's about the same number. My system is working properly. This is good. This is what you expect to see. This is what you want to see in your phase change heat pump. Both those chambers share roughly the same latent energy. The reason for that is theoretically, with phase change, the sum total of all latent energy in this entire heat pump should sum up to 0. Basically, no extra energy is being pushed into the heat pump or being lost from it. That's ideally what you want to see. And another thing is, while I do have some gas inside my gas pipes, you can tell that the pressure is not increasing, it's actually going down. So my system is working well and working like it should be. That's what you want to see on a well-working system. So now let's talk about how it fails. And I will add a little caveat that the counterflow heat exchanger can definitely aggravate or magnify the failure. So before I go too far into that, it can fail in one of three ways. Either side gets too hot, either side gets too cold, or you just outright overfilled it. And and these all will kind of play together, and especially the fact that it's overfilled will help to well, it will magnify the symptoms. They each have symptoms, and this is what you need to be on the lookout for when you're trying to diagnose or troubleshoot the system, or wondering if it will eventually fail. Assuming that you're not getting those two conditions. So let's talk about either side gets too hot. Now, depending on the temperature, you're going to see different effects for the chambers. If either side gets too hot, what you end up seeing is that the evaporation chamber is just going to evaporate liquids even faster. So it's going to take in liquids and it's going to keep evaporating, trying to cool down as best as possible. And in so doing, it's going to keep dumping a lot of gases into the gas pipe network. Uh, on the condensation chamber side, uh, if it's too hot, it's just not going to condense anything anymore. And so what that means is when the condensation chamber stops working because it gets too hot, it's not going to make any liquids. Therefore, the evaporation chamber is not going to have liquids to evaporate. So you're no longer going to be cooling anything. So that's basically what will happen when either side gets too hot. If they get past the max liquid temperature, you're going to have more issues that could result from that. Uh, let's talk about either side gets too cold. Just like the previous condition, when it gets too cold, what ends up happening is the evaporation chamber is not going to have any more evaporation. It's colder than the liquid temperature. Therefore, it's not going to cool down anymore. No more evaporation. What that ends up doing is, since there's no more gas for the condensation chamber to condense, it's not going to condense anything anymore. Therefore, you're no longer going to have heating on that end. So just keep that in mind. And of course, if it gets too cold on the condensation side, then it's just going to have a lot of condensation. This could be a good or a bad thing. And again, these are both conditions and what is going to happen because of those. If you actually get colder than the freezing temp, well, that's a huge problem, because if this is a custom system, your pipes are going to break. Just outright, the pipes are going to break. But the phase change devices, they can safely store frozen gases and liquids inside them. But they can slowly release them, as the condensation or evaporation is happening. So it is possible that you will get ices dumped into the pipe network, which can lead to an eventual failure. But just keep that in mind that they at least have some safeguards, but it's not perfect. Whoops. Now, I talked about what happens with both sides, and usually the problem is magnified because it's overfilled. Now, if you have a lot of liquids, like for example, you had a massive reservoir of liquid refrigerant that you're running this system of, well, this is where the problem kind of just becomes worse. Um, if you've overfilled it with liquids and you get to the case where you just have a lot of evaporation, well, all those liquids evaporate, they become gas, and they get trapped in the gas pipe network. And so what that ends up doing is you either have the gas pipe network begin to have some condensation occurring, which could break the pipes, or if somehow it's way too hot that it can't condense, eventually the gas pipes will overpressurize and, again, break due to overpressurization. Now, in the odd case that you really fill those liquid pipes to the brim and you get to the point where the condensation chamber is just doing a lot of condensation, uh, you do have the possibility of overfilling the liquid pipes, and therefore that will take up the last little bits of space, cause overpressurization, and kaboom. So just keep this in mind that these conditions for too hot or too cold predominantly happen because you somehow are working outside of the refrigerant's temperature range. So long as you're within the freezing temperature and the max liquid temperature, it's unlikely that you will see a catastrophic failure. Now, I say unlikely because you could still hit conditions where you could potentially see these issues, but if you are, for example, trying to cool down 2200 Celsius steam from an H2 combustor, you're way out here in the temperature end to be, pushing into something that is at max liquid at 152 Celsius. So just keep that in mind, that you do have to be careful about how hot or cold you temperature sources you put to the system, because this can, it contributes to the failure. So now, what about safeguarding the system? Well, okay. you're going to see that I added a condensation valve and a purge valve. Now, this is generally standard practice for protecting those pipe networks. Liquids and gas pipes will break them. Overpressurized liquid pipes, as in, over 6 megapascals, will also break them. Now, if someone advised you to do this, or you're just doing this because that's the known good safeguards, that isn't a problem per se. I'm just gonna say that it's good practice. It's something you should definitely do. But I will caution you that for a phase change heat pump, these safeties mask a deeper problem. So just keep that in mind, that it will mask a deeper problem. And so what I mean by that is, again, any condensation or evaporation happening where they shouldn't is a problem for your system. It's indicative that something is either failing because of the temperatures being out of whack, or something else related to that. It just means that your system is not working like it should. So to kind of go over that, I'm gonna leave my condensation chamber off, or actually first I'm just gonna bump down the pressure to let's say 3600. So this is only going to condense up to a point. So it's going to be a very heavily throttled system, and I'm just going to turn that off for the time being. And I am going to tell the evap chamber to just evaporate as fast as it can, at the normal setting. So right off the bat, this is evaporating about 9 kilojoules, dropping. And if we check at the condensation side, its latent energy is about 2 kilojoules. So, if you see this huge imbalance, something is clearly wrong at this point. Now, remember what I said, that the sum total of the latent energy should theoretically come out to 0. So if the condensation chamber does not have the 12 kilo, or equal latent energy as the evaporation chamber, that means it's happening somewhere else. And in this case, it's going to be your gas pipes. And that's why you see this stress, climbing up. You have a lot of condensation where there shouldn't be any condensation. And so that's why the condensation valve, it can protect your system from failure. If this stress kept going up, the condensation valve will save your system from complete failure. However, this system going like this creates a different problem. What that ends up doing is that now your thermal energy is getting stuck in the refrigerant between the two chambers. Remember that this condensation chamber is supposed to be dumping out all that heat energy. And if it's not doing that effectively, that's a major problem. You need to fix that problem first. This valve is only hiding the problem, so you just need to be aware of that. So, wait, I'm sure you're wondering, what does that mean for the system in whole? Well, if this energy is getting stuck in here, that means the liquid is warming up. You're going to get to a point where your evaporation chamber will actually be heating up. And so this will be one of those, seems really weird, doesn't make sense that it's happening, but that's what's going to happen. The evaporation chamber is not going to cool down despite the liquids, or it's actually going to heat up because of this temperature disparity. In fact, if I were to shut that off, you will see that very easily. You see right there, it is warming up. And that's why I say that, yes, the condensation valve helps, but it masks a problem. So then what can you do? Well, if the condensation chamber cannot handle this, well, we're just going to go ahead and remove that. If the condensation chamber cannot handle all the gases inside the gas pipe network, there's really only two solutions that I would recommend. Number one is add more volume to the gas pipe network. This is a band-aid solution at best, so I will let you know that this only temporarily fixes the problem by adding enough pipe volume in the gas pipe network to prevent condensation from occurring. So as you can tell now, there's no condensation occurring in the gas pipe network. But the condensation chamber is still not really keeping up because the pressure is, whoops, I did bump it up a bit too much. Because the pressure in the gas pipe network is still increasing. That's still indicative that the problem's there. So extra volume on the gas pipe networks is a band-aid fix. It just prevents condensation from happening in the gas pipe networks, and that's a good temporary fix to do. The true fix, however, that you would need to do is to probably add another condensation chamber. So what that would do is an extra condensation chamber means now all this extra gas that's been pooling in the gas pipe network will go to another chamber to condense to then, dump out that energy more effectively. But just keep this in mind that usually the only reason you would see something like this is because one chamber is getting to the point where it can no longer condense or evaporate as effectively as it would be. And that could be a problem with your stable temperature source. So make sure to diagnose all the issues, see where the true problem is, and then apply fixes to get the system working properly. But this will take care of the gas pipe side. Typically that's an issue with condensation. It's usually too hot or not properly set to handle that. So let me bump that up. Okay, so now let's talk about the purge valve. Now, the purge valve prevents overpressure on the liquid pipe network. But just like the condensation valve, what it ends up doing is it would allow evaporation to be occurring in the liquid pipe network, which again is a problem. So usually when you're overpressurized in the liquid pipe network, that's because it's too hot. So if you take a look at pollutants, at 140 Celsius, I need a pressure of about 5.6 megapascals for it to stay a liquid, which is very scary high pressures. And if you try to set a purge valve to keep it at 4 megapascals, you see that would require the liquids to be at about 46, 47 Celsius. And so because of that huge disparity, any liquids that hit that will try to evaporate, due to the low pressure. Again, this is another problem because now you're having evaporation happen in the liquid pipe network instead of the evaporation chamber where it should be happening. So what that ends up doing is you try to create kind of a cold spot right here, and if it's, instead of cooling down your target gas that you're supposed to be cooling down. And again, usually this is a problem because of high temperatures, whether it's high temperatures on the condensation side or with the counterflow added, the evaporation side. So what's a good fix for that? This one's actually a little bit tougher, and honestly, the best fix for that is to never get above the max condensation temperature for the refrigerant. Now, I told you that the counterflow heat exchanger magnifies a problem. When the counterflow heat exchanger is added to your system, it actually makes it work much better, provided that the condensation chamber is actually warmer than the evaporation chamber. It actually works well at that point. But if you get to the weird case where the evaporation chamber is warmer than the condensation chamber, well, now it's actually going to be a detriment. Additionally, if your system is failing due to the temperature increases, it kind of makes things worse. So for me to illustrate that a little bit better, let's go back. Say I'm trying to heat up 2200, cool down 2200 Celsius steam in the evaporation chamber. And let's say the chamber gets up to 400 Celsius after all the evaporation is happening. Well, if I am releasing 400 Celsius pollutants in my gas pipe network right here, and the condensation chamber is creating, relatively cool liquid pollutants, maybe 60 Celsius. So we have my cold liquid pollutants and my super hot gases coming in. They swap temperatures. Well, now I have colder gas going into my condensation chamber, which means I'm not going to dump that heat as effectively. But the bigger problem is, well, my liquid pollutants that were cold is now super hot, which means that my evaporation chamber can't cool as effectively. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is if that temperature change, when it happens and your liquids are above, the max liquid temperature for the refrigerant, well, now you have a huge problem because all those liquids want to just evaporate. And so you see, that's where you can get a massive pressure spike at the liquid pipe network. The purge valve might be the only thing that ultimately saves that, to be honest. This will be one of the few cases that that's actually helpful. But truthfully, if you got yourself into that boat, the best thing to do when you have a massive temperature change on either end is to just outright disconnect the pipe network, like so. Allow your system to kind of fix itself and stabilize, get itself back within the working range. And then when you try to reintroduce the heat load, maybe this time actually do it in a gradual fashion. Maybe just pump a little bit of that super hot material at a time. It's still going to cause a massive temperature change, but you don't want to let the system be working outside of, the freezing temp and liquid temperature range. So again, a condensation valve and a purge valve, it's good advice. It's good practice for safeguarding your system. Just keep in mind that adding them in and having them working usually masks a deeper issue in your system. Typically, it will mask that the system is failing or is pretty much is at the point of failure. Once again, to recap, you want equal latent energy on both devices to show that it is working properly. Again, you can have a temporary fix for gases pooling in the gas pipe network by increasing the volume to help discourage condensation. But again, if you have an imbalance in the system, you either need to add extra chambers to correct that imbalance or fix your temperature sources because they went out of whack. So I'm hoping that this helps you understand how to how to tell that the system's working right, and also hopefully how to start troubleshooting issues with the system. Um, Again, if you follow the previous two videos, you should be in a good state. And this is something that you have to actually work with and experience yourself and work with different gases and different conditions you put them in so that you can kind of gain an understanding of, what I know for how I know these things are working right or about to fail. And again, feel free to ask questions here or the Discord or anything. There's usually a lot of people that will be very grateful. They'll be very glad to answer questions because this is a complex system, making your own AC. But at the end of the day, you know, play the game, enjoy it, have fun, learn how to test the system, and once you get good at using this simple system, because it is very simple, these devices are very friendly. Once you get experience with those systems, then you can graduate yourself and start making your own custom systems. Start using turbo volume pumps or different valves or anything to create your own phase change related heat pump system. And hopefully by then you have a greater understanding and you can start to spot where shortfalls are in your system or where points of failures are. So yeah, thank you for your time. Hope to see you in other videos, and thank you and have a good day. Bye bye.